The desert has a way of swallowing truth. It buries bones, it erases tracks, and it leaves behind only the stories people choose to remember. In New Mexico territory, one story has outlived all the others. The tale of a boy outlaw who laughed at danger, danced with death, and slipped through the fingers of the law as if he were made of smoke. Billy the Kid. He was born Henry McCarty, though he wore names the way other boys wore hats. Henry Antrim, Kid Antrim, William H. Bonney. By the time the newspapers got a hold of him, he was Billy the Kid, the West's favorite villain and reluctant hero. He was small, quick, bilingual, and charming. A boy who could shoot straight, ride hard, and grin like he knew something the rest of the world didn't. The official story says he died in 1881, shot in the dark by Sheriff Pat Garrett, but legends rarely cooperate with official stories. And decades later, in a quiet Texas town, an old man with bright eyes and a familiar grin stepped forward and said the unthinkable. "I am Billy the Kid." His name was Brushy Bill Roberts, and this is the story of the man who may have lived two lives. One as the West's most famous outlaw, and one as the old cowboy who refused to stay dead. Henry McCarty entered the world quietly, somewhere in New York City around 1859. His father vanished early, his mother died young, and the boy drifted west like a leaf, caught in a storm. By the time he reached New Mexico territory, he had already learned Spanish, learned to ride, learned to shoot, and learned that the world rewarded the bold and punished the slow. He was barely more than a boy when he found himself in the middle of the Lincoln County War, a conflict that tore the territory apart. He rode with the regulators, Dick Brewer, Charlie Bowdry, Tom O'Folliard, Jose Chavez y Chavez, men who fought not for glory, but because the alternative was to be crushed by the Murphy-Dolan machine. Billy wasn't the cold-blooded killer the newspapers painted him to be. He was loyal, almost painfully so. He protected his friends, defended the families who sheltered him, and moved through the territory with a confidence that bordered on reckless. He also played the guitar at Mexican dances, spoke Spanish with a local accent, and charmed nearly everyone he met. But the war hardened him. He was shot at, hunted, betrayed, and forced to kill to survive. And the scars he carried, 4 of them in particular, would later become the key to a mystery that refused to die. Billy's escapes were the stuff of legend long before he died, or didn't die, depending on who you believe. He slipped out of jails with the ease of a man stepping through a doorway. In Silver City, he climbed up a chimney. In other towns, he simply vanished, aided by locals who saw him as a folk hero rather than a criminal. But nothing compared to the escape he pulled in Lincoln in April 1881. They kept him in the courthouse under the watch of deputies James Bell and Bob Ollinger. Billy waited, watched, and when the moment came, he moved with the speed of a man who had already decided he would not die in that room. On the stairs, he slipped free, grabbed Bell's revolver, and shot him under the arm. When Ollinger came running back from Wortley Hotel, Billy took the deputy's own shotgun, leaned out the window, and greeted him with a calm, "Hello, Bob," before firing. He broke his leg irons with a pickaxe, mounted a horse, and rode out of Lincoln singing. Witnesses swore they heard him laughing as he disappeared. That was the boy the world remembered. That was the boy Pat Garrett claimed to have killed. The official version of Billy's death is simple, almost too simple. On July 14, 1881, Billy walked into Pete Maxwell's darkened bedroom at Fort Sumner, speaking Spanish, "Quién es?" trying to see who sat in the shadows. Garrett, waiting on the edge of the bed, recognized the voice, drew his revolver, and fired. Billy fell dead. But even that night, Doubts whispered throughout the adobe walls of Fort Sumner. Some locals said the dead man had a full beard, something Billy could never grow. Others said the identification was rushed, careless, almost desperate. Deputy John Poe reportedly muttered, "You've shot the wrong man," before Garrett silenced him. The room had been pitch black. No lamp was lit. The identification rested on a voice and a shadow. And then there were people who swore they saw Billy afterward. Alive, moving quietly through the territory, slipping across the border or riding toward Texas. Most of those stories faded with time, but one of them didn't. Decades later in Hico, Texas, an old man named O.L. Brushy Bill Roberts lived a quiet life. He worked as a cowboy, a scout, and a laborer. He kept to himself, but there was something about him, something in the way he moved, the way he spoke Spanish, the way he smiled with a flash of slightly protruding canine teeth, that made people look twice. One day, a man named Jim Martinez, who had lived in Fort Sumner in his youth, saw Brushy walking down the street. Martinez froze, stared, and then called out with a shock that came from somewhere deep in his memory. "Billy, Billy Bonney, is that you?" Brushy stopped, went pale, and walked away without a word. Martinez swore until his dying day that he had recognized the kid. The story might have ended there, just another rumor, if not for a probate investigator named William V. Morrison. Morrison had been interviewing an elderly man named Joe Hines, who quietly revealed he was actually Jesse Evans, Billy's old enemy from the Lincoln County War. Evans told Morrison that Billy had not died in 1881. He was alive, living under another name in Texas. Morrison followed the trail to Hico, and to Brushy Bill. Brushy Bill denied everything at first. Then slowly he began to talk. He said he had been born William Henry Roberts in 1859. He said he had used the name William H. Bonney in New Mexico. He said Pat Garrett had killed another man, Billy Barlow, and passed the body off as the kid's. He said he had escaped to Mexico, then drifted into Texas, living quietly under the name Oliver Roberts. Morrison examined Brushy closely, and what he found startled him. Brushy's body bore 4 scars that matched the wounds Billy the Kid was known to have suffered. A bullet scar in the upper right thigh, exactly where Billy had been shot during a skirmish in the Lincoln County War. A long knife scar across the left forearm, matching the cut Billy received in a bar fight at Fort Grant. A puckering mark near the left shoulder blade, the remnant of a grazing shot Billy had taken while fleeing a posse near White Oaks. A faint gunpowder burn on the right cheek, in the exact same spot where Billy had been burned when a revolver misfired during a scuffle with Wendy Cahill. These were not vague injuries. They were precise, documented, and they were all on Brushy's body. Then there were the teeth. Billy the Kid had been described by multiple contemporaries as having distinctive canine teeth, slightly forward, almost fang-like, giving him a mischievous, wolfish grin. When Brushy smiled, those same teeth appeared, unmistakable. One witness said, "Those teeth are Billy's. I'd know that smile anywhere." Brushy knew things, small things, obscure things, that no imposter should have known. He described the layout of the Lincoln County Courthouse in detail, including a loose floorboard in the room where he had been held. He recalled the pet name Paulita Maxwell used for him. He spoke of a scar on Charlie Bowdry's ribs that had never been published. He named regulators who had been forgotten by history. He spoke Spanish with the same dialect Billy had learned from the Hispanic families of New Mexico. Some of these details were later verified through archival research, archaeological surveys, and rediscovered documents. Brushy's knowledge was not the knowledge of a man who had read a book. It was the knowledge of a man who had been there. In 1950, Morrison brought Brushy to Santa Fe to meet Governor Thomas J. Mabry and request the pardon. Brushy believed he was finally going to receive the justice he had been promised 70 years earlier. Instead, he walked into a media circus. Reporters crowded the room. Flashbulbs popped. Mabry treated Brushy like a curiosity, not a man seeking justice. The old cowboy, already frail, struggled under the pressure. He suffered a stroke during the ordeal, collapsing in front of the cameras. He died in Haiku not long after, taking with him whatever truth he carried. Why would people lie about Billy the Kid's death? Why would they insist the legend ended in 1881? For Pat Garrett, admitting he had killed the wrong man could have destroyed his career, his book, and his reputation. For the territory, declaring the kid dead brought peace to a region exhausted by violence. For the newspapers, the story was too good to question. And for the people of Fort Sumner, the truth was complicated, dangerous, and easier to bury than to confront. What would have been gained if Brushy Bill truly had been Billy? History would have had to rewrite itself. Garrett's legacy would have crumbled. The legend of the kid would have grown even larger. And the world would have been forced to admit that the most famous outlaw in American history had outsmarted death itself. Sources for this video are historical accounts of the Lincoln County War, contemporary newspaper reports from 1881, William B. Morrison's interviews and affidavits, testimony from Jim Martinez and other eyewitnesses, medical examinations of Brushy Bill Roberts, archaeological surveys of the Lincoln County Courthouse, photographic comparisons conducted by forensic analysis, statements from the Maxwell and Bowdry families, court records, census documents, and territorial archives. 2 graves claim Billy the Kid, one in Fort Sumner, marked and fenced, visited by tourists, the other in Hamilton Cemetery in Haiku, where Brushy Bill lies under a simple stone. Between them stretches a century of doubt, scars, teeth, eyewitnesses, and a story that refuses to die. Maybe Pat Garrett killed Billy the Kid in 1881. Maybe he didn't. Maybe the kid slipped out of death's grasp, the way he slipped out of every trap ever set for him, laughing softly as he vanished into the night. And maybe, just maybe, he lived long enough to grow old, to walk the streets of Texas, and to hear someone call out his name from a lifetime ago. The desert keeps its secrets, but sometimes, if you listen closely, you can still hear a young outlaw laughing as he rides away.
Oh, America, your light will never fade. Together we rise, no matter the shade. With every trial, we learn to adapt. Our resilience shines, a beacon to the nation's heart. From the mountains to the sea, our voices ring clear. No matter how far, we'll stay forever near. In every struggle, we find our way. United, we're strong in this great land. They say, oh, America, you're more than just a name, a symbol of hope, a promise of fame. Through every test, we keep our aim, our love for freedom, a guiding flame.